At the end of college, one of my friends came out as a lesbian, and she told me, John, all this time I was having sex with men, and it always felt bad, but I never knew that meant anything, because no one told me I was supposed to enjoy sex. They just told me I should make it good for my boyfriend. And it really struck me that someone was willing to accept sex that hurt them for years because they just never learned it could be different, or should be. And that story has stuck with me in my work here as a PhD student in women's gender and sexuality studies. I lead a sex education team that teaches 1,000 OSU students per semester. And alongside condoms and birth control, we focus on the human dimensions of sex, like learning that you have a right to enjoy sex, learning great communication skills to make sure you and your partners enjoy it, and learning to talk openly with your doctor to get the best sexual health care. Our teaching is inspired by an idea from the 1970s women's rights movement, that having control of what happens to your body during sex is a big part of overall wellness for everyone. And I don't care whether you're having sex. There are so many social pressures telling you you've got to have sex because you're a loser if you don't, or you can't have sex because you're a dirty slut if you do, and I think all that is silly. My only concern is that if and when you have sex, you really know how to do it in the safest and most fun way possible. I know it might sound far out for sex education to cover these human dimensions of sex, like pleasure, communication, and healthcare, because American debates about sex ed often get stuck at a much more basic level, like debating if schools even should teach sex education. Fewer than half of American states require sex ed. Many states don't require teaching contraception, and only 13 states require sex ed to be medically accurate. So a lot of us get stuck with high school sex ed that looks like the health class from Mean Girls, where the gym coach says, don't have sex or you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex, you guys, promise, but also take these condoms. So in other words, we get high school sex ed that's incomplete, contradictory, and just not useful for our real lives. But in order to really protect our health, sex ed has to cover human topics like pleasure. It may sound unimportant or even inappropriate for schools to mention pleasure, but like one of my colleagues says, if you've never learned what great sex should feel like, how are you supposed to recognize bad sex, or even sex that's hurting you? And this is not only an issue for people like my friend who came out as a lesbian. Many women are still raised with the idea that sex is just gonna hurt sometimes and you just have to put up with it. And if that's what you believe, how are you supposed to know that you have a right to say, I wanna stop, or I wanna slow down, or I wanna try more lube, or try a different position? This is why schools need to tell kids, you have a right to enjoy sex. And here are some ways to do it. Here are parts of your body that can feel great. Here are ways to touch those body parts for the best effect. For example, schools should say, here's the clitoris. Here's how you find it. Here are some ways to touch it with fingers, tongues, whatever. And you might think, come on, it's the 21st century with the internet and porn. Do students really need to learn in a classroom how to find the clitoris? And the answer is yes. Because first of all, none of us should have to learn about our bodies from inaccurate sources like porn, and kids should not be left unsupported to figure out good sources on the internet. And second, I remember a day in my third year of college when a friend of mine, a guy who'd been having sex with women for a while at that point, came up to me at lunch and said, John, you take gender studies. Can you tell me, where's the clitoris? And I was like, girl, if we want a future where straight men don't have to ask gay men how to find the clitoris, then schools need to openly talk about pleasure. But it's hard to enjoy sex if you feel scared for your physical safety. That's why kids need to learn great communication skills to make sure they and their partners feel safe during sex. I first realized this issue when I was 19 and came out of the closet and had my first date with a guy. And sitting there in our campus coffee shop in St. Louis, I realized, oh, this guy's a lot taller than me. If we were alone and he wanted to hurt me, there's nothing I could do about it. And I also realized, wait, when I've gone on dates with women before, did they have the same concern about me? This is an example of why kids need to hear, put yourself in your partner's shoes. If anything about this sexual situation might make your partner feel uncomfortable, put them at ease. Say something like, tell me what you like, or I only want to do what you want to do. And once you've used those communication skills to make each other feel safe, you can also communicate to make sex way more fun. So many of us feel ashamed of saying what we want during sex. But if schools are going to tell kids that their pleasure matters, then students need to build confidence communicating what they enjoy, so that in real life, people feel ready to tell their partners, I love it when you kiss my neck. Or, I've been loving our Harry Potter Princess Jasmine roleplay this week. But next week I want us to roleplay R2-D2 and C3PO. Though that's very makeup intensive and expensive. But makeup budgets aside, sexual communication is not only an issue in the bedroom, it's also an issue in the doctor's office. In order to get the best sexual health care, we have to feel confident bringing up some awkward questions with our doctors, and that takes practice. That's why students need to learn in class how to start conversations like, please tell me my options for birth control, or hey, I really need PEP, which is an emergency medication for HIV. A lot of folks here might be surprised to know that HIV can be cured in the first 3 days after you're exposed if you get this medication called PEP. But in order to get it, you have to know PEP exists and feel confident saying to your doctor, hey, my condom ripped and I need PEP right now. Now, these changes to sex education to cover healthcare, communication, and pleasure can start in our personal conversations, like when parents talk to their kids about sex. There are great online resources like O School, Taboo, Fuck Yes, and Advocates for Youth that are made to help young people learn holistically about sex and made to help adults speak more openly on these topics with their kids. And you can also tell your schools to expand and humanize their sex ed classes. So often, schools only hear from parents about sex ed in the negative, when parents want to limit sexual information. But if you think holistic sex ed matters, please let schools hear your voice instead. And if we can make this kind of humanized sex education the norm in our conversations and our classrooms, we can move toward a future where no one thinks they have to accept harm as a part of sex. So let's all get out there and make sex education a lot more human. Thank you.